La siguiente presentación la hará Natalia Riera.
Now we're going to hear from Natalia Riera, and she comes from Eri Artean. And she works, it's an organisation that works in various fields of actions from global justice and specifically in relation to the climate emergency, focusing its networking with other groups on feminism and social ecology. Through supportive cooperation, emancipatory education, critical awareness of North-South relations and political advocacy, it seeks to promote social transformation. In times of climate and environmental emergency, the faces and voices of those who defend their territories raise the need to question the unlimited growth of our material consumption as the basis of our well-being. For this reason, Entrepueblos has published the website Activistas por la Vida, Activists for Life, a website with different materials that deal with the right to life and the defense of one's territory. It also offers a teaching guide to learn how to cope with and how to rise to the climate emergency. Natalia forms part of the emancipatory education team at the Entrepueblos Association, linked to different activist groups for climate justice, such as Acción Ecofeminista and ClimAcció, among others. And they all work within the Xarxa network for climate justice. So a warm round of applause, please, for Natalia.
Pues muchísimas.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Eskerrik asko, as we say here in the Basque Country. Thank you to all of you who are here and those who are following us over the internet. And also thanks to my fellow speakers who have spoken, well, both this morning and yesterday. And I'm going to be closing the morning session by talking about our teaching resources, the teaching resources that we provide. But I think there's a lot of points in common. There are a lot of points in common with what previous speakers have talked about. Now, I'm here to present a teaching or a pedagogical resource which focuses on the climate emergency, but which forms part of our broader project that we have here in Entrepueblos, which have to do with our main program called Activistas por la Vida, Activists for Life. Now, in Carlos's presentation, he talked a little bit about this particular aspect, and I'm going to talk a little bit about this emancipatory education, because this is what we aim to do, to provide emancipatory education. And this is the approach that we adopt. Again, it's an approach which was developed by Pablo Freire. And we said that we understand education as an act of knowledge and a process of transformative action which aims to change reality, our situation. Now, we've been working for many, many years, working with different countries in the Southern Hemisphere, South American countries, always working towards this emancipatory education, trying to provide pedagogical resources, and also providing tools and knowledge creation processes, awareness raising processes and communication processes, because we believe that communication needs to accompany all education and a raising awareness and knowledge building, because it's a fundamental part of this. And we also aim to strengthen different spaces for articulating ideas, taking action and mobilizing people. We also work on human rights and environmental rights, trying to be very cross-cutting in our approach, focusing on different types of feminism, justice, sovereignty, and social environmentalism, working on the basis of international solidarity as well as part of different networks and alliances. And we also try to provide a space for reflection for action. Now, we've been talking about the time, and I think the times in which we live, and other speakers have done this as well. But I think it's important to take stock of where we are and to understand the context in which we work, both in Spain and in the rest of the world. What's the current situation then? Well, we have many different crises all happening at once. We have different combinations of inequalities, which end up violating people's rights. And in this sense, the emancipatory education plays a key role. It's going to help us to fight against this globalized system, which acts outside the margins of the cycles which enable life to be reproduced and sustained. We have this confluence of multiple crises, and this gives rise to a series of inconsistencies, different cases of violence and instances of violence. In short, and just to sum up, and really not to repeat what's been said before, we are aware that we are vulnerable beings, we are interdependent beings, and we are eco-dependent beings.
So in this context of crisis and different approaches in Entrepueblos, we are now we've been working on this for some years now, on resources on activists for life. Let me tell you about this project, Activistas por la Vida, that concentrates very much on mainly on a photography exhibition by Gervasio Sanchez, that is a journalist, and that is a photography exhibition that has been in Barcelona, in Villafranca del Penedès, and now it's in Tarragona, and then it will be in Tarragona, so it moves from city to city. And the important thing about this exhibition is to put faces, to make defenders of human rights and environmental rights, and to make them visible. And we come closer to understanding what they do and the reasons why they do them, and how they've been criminalized. And we all know the high number of murders among people defending life. So this is a holistic project. We have it available on our website, activistasporlavida.org, and here you will have access to the stories of the people that have been participating in the exhibition. We've got different documentaries as well that are available. Let me highlight just a few of them, like Las Sevillas de Berta Cáceres, some publications like Mujeres sin conflictos ecoterritoriales, impactos, estrategias y resistencias. And we also have some didactical units on climate emergency that I will mention later on. So all these resources, all these teaching resources are available on our website. You have the address up there, with a common goal, really, which is to activate and strengthen these actions for life, not only in the global south, but also in the global north, where we live. The idea is that all these actions lead to awareness raising on the basis of motivation and on emotions as well. Why not? In order to take steps towards action by the youth, but not only by the young people. We also have a responsibility here. This responsibility is not just laying on the shoulders of young people, but they also need to be the spokespeople of what they want and their actions. So let's see if I can speed up, because otherwise I won't have time to cover everything I would like to share with you. Let me show you this material developed in line with Activistas por la Vida. It's been developed in partnership with Edu Alter, which I'm sure you're familiar with. This is a group of people that's been working on teaching resources for many years. Why have we developed this teaching unit? Well, because, and this is why I wanted to give you some information about the current context, where we've got a number of different crises going on, why we need to place life at the core, and we need to have a life that deserves to be lived in order to activate change. All this material is aimed at supporting and strengthen the work carried out by activists for life in the global north. And it's aimed at young people in formal education and non-formal education. We concentrate on Guatemala and Southern America in general. This material is to be used in the second cycle of secondary education, and it can also be implemented in non-formal education and other situations, feminist groups, etc., etc. It could be useful to all of them. As I was saying, one of the main goals, together with other groups of people we have worked in partnership with, is to activate mobilization and co-responsibility. And also action, of course, in order for us to have elements that enable us to analyze climate justice, actions defending climate justice in order to defend human rights, environmental, social rights. At the end of the day, the idea is to defend global justice. We believe that education is one of the tools that has the greatest potential here, because it can make this movement or young-based movement stronger, because they're all very committed to climate justice. Here we concentrate on the global south and Latin America, because there are more and more activists for life there that defend the rights of all individuals and also the rights of the planet. I think that when we speak about ecofeminism, we're going to be dealing with all these. Yayo Herrero will be covering this ground. So how do we work? Well, I mentioned the importance of the collective work here, not just when it comes to developing this type of material, but also when it comes to implementing and using them, because there are different ways of doing things here, of course. This unit covers climate emergency with the human rights approach and taking complexity into consideration, trying to come up with a cross-cutting way of looking at this issue. This material has not been developed for one single subject, right? This didactic unit is going to be applicable to different areas of the school curriculum. It is also very important to stay in the field of science, of course, but there is a cross-cutting approach of everything that is eco-social, because this has to do with the planet. And it also takes into consideration the eco-feminist look. Here I would like to mention teachers that work in Entrepueblos, and we also have Edu Alter participating in the project. I would like to highlight the involvement from the very beginning of the process of young people from Fridays for Future. They have been involved from an early stage and participated very actively in the project. And I would also like to thank the fact that in the last stage of this teaching unit, we had the chance to implement it in a high school in Barcelona, where I come from. This is a school that participates in a network. So it was very easy actually to implement the project because the time and space was allocated for its implementation. So we there worked with students on the fourth year of secondary education. I have a video clip here. I will show it to you later on if I have time, right? This teaching unit is made up of 8 teaching proposals. All of them give priority to how above what. So we look at the processes, we tackle different themes from the perspective of climate justice. We incorporate here the individual systemic look. We take into consideration the approach of global North and global South. We want to foster mobilization in order to generate action. That's what we want to do, because we believe this is very necessary to achieve the necessary transformation. We need to make small contributions to transformation at all levels, and this is what we try and do by means of this project. And here the term co-responsibility is essentially. We try and build knowledge about the global reality we live in, but also taking our daily life into consideration, of course, because everything that is macro can be understood by means of everything that is micro, right? From our daily lives, because there are many phenomena that are occurring internationally, like different treaties and different political commitments have or could be affected by our consumption decisions, all the decisions, small decisions we make every single day of our lives. This teaching unit also has educational goals to it, of course. We want to know more about the causes and consequences of climate emergency in this crisis that is unequal, that is combining different crises. We also want to have a look from the global justice perspective. We believe this is fundamental. We need to here take into consideration gender equality, climate equality, and justice, critical thinking, etc., etc. We need to think about the present, understand it better in order to come up with a better future. We tend to focus more on the present for people not to feel overwhelmed, but we don't forget to look at the future, of course, because this is already happening here now, and everything we do now will have an impact on the future. Now, beyond all the causes and consequences, we also want to think about possible solutions and alternatives to the current social and economic model. So we want to be very critical about how we develop our economy, and we need to worry more about sustainability, social and environmental sustainability. We also want to have a participatory attitude and a democratic one towards the group. This is also very important to us in this project. Also, neighborhoods are important, not just families, because we want to have this broad democratic community we all belong to. And we also want to raise awareness and activate political participation. This is fundamental for us. Some very good examples of this have been shared with you by the previous speakers. So the teaching approach is multi-dimensional here. So activities are designed to include cognitive approaches, emotional approaches as well, with different looks, and we develop content by means of multimedia tools. We work in small groups, and there's a broad range of tasks that are carried out and that help us deal with the content we want to develop. I'm not going to give you much detail here because it's already been mentioned. We focus very much on the emergency that we are now facing. There's a human rights crisis going on, an environmental crisis, a social crisis, etc., etc. There are multidimensional consequences here: increase in the temperature, migration, etc., etc. These phenomena are already occurring and will continue to do so. We need to be fully aware of these consequences. We need to know more about them, understand them, think about them, analyze them critically, to then be able to make proposals. So from the micro level, we can go to a macro level. There are many different levels of possible participation here. So generally speaking, our material makes a global presentation of its goals, a description of the content, the current situation, then why we're working about climate emergency, because here we go beyond that emergency. We talk about human rights. We also include some considerations about the methodologies we're going to be developing, and then we have a number of different activities. There's an activity that is carried out at the very beginning in order to know what we know about the situation, and then we move on to other types of activities, and the last one would imply an action, which is our main goal. All the activities in all 8 activities, we explain the activity, what goals they have, what contents are going to be developed, how the activity is going to be developed, the material that is necessary in this activity. We also have additional material that may be required sometimes. Then an assessment is carried out, and there's, as I said, additional material that can support teachers in their work. This is a toolkit to support the development of the different sessions. One thing that we don't see in each one of the activities, but that is essential as well, for Entrepueblos, is that every session needs to start by saying and stating what we're going to be doing, what our objectives are. So they need to know what the sequence will look like, so that participants have an idea about how the session is organized. Of course, it could be changed if necessary, but they need to have a clear idea of what we're here for. All these teaching proposals were presented globally in April, proposals that are going to be developed in over 5 weeks, so that students know about how the sessions are going to be implemented and suggest changes that were actually suggested. And it was also very interesting for us. On top of the assessment, each session, each topic that is dealt with is also assessed internally. And this is interesting for us. We see how they learn and how we include everything we are learning in the process. So we need to have this continuous assessment going on individually to then share that with the group, so that there is a collective learning process going on at all times. As I said, this teaching unit includes 8 activities. We suggest this sequence you see here. There's a first activity on previous knowledge. The next one would be about identifying and thinking about the current situation. The third step here would be about emotional temperature, where we're going to be thinking about how we feel about all this, and maybe suggest micro actions at school, in our families, etc. This is where we share how we feel about this situation of collapse we are facing. And there may be fear, indifference there. Sometimes we feel outraged. And how are we going to be channeling all that in order to move forward towards articulating our movements and actions towards change? Well, this is one session, but all sessions include the possibility of talking about the process, because we're dealing with very complex issues here. And we need to know how to support these processes and not to stop them or break them. We also work about transition and life projects, health, eco-dependency. And as I was saying, the idea here is to activate actions and to create new activists. All the knowledge, all the process that is going on, all the tasks, everything that is shared, that can include, of course, controversy sometimes and many different dynamics, is aimed at creating very specific action in the territory. In this case, in this high school, an action was carried out in the street in order to inform the different neighbors about the situation. There were performances, there was a board where some concepts were explained, etc., etc. It was very interesting, really, and we all learned very much, many things. This enabled us to replicate it at school internally in a day for the environment with other students that were working on climate justice, etc. So everyone is invited to participate in the experience. Let me show you very quickly this material. I just want to show it to you. It's available on the Entrepueblos and Activistas por la Vida.org websites. I just want to show you a couple of things because they all have the same structure, really. These activities last 2 hours. So we give them plenty of material and different proposals about what elements they can choose and work on. So we give them how the activity needs to be developed. We believe it could be done, it could be covered in 2 hours. So students get the objectives, the content, how the activity is going to be developed. They are also told about the material that they're going to be needing. Then there's a moment for the assessment by the group, and then additional material, which is the toolkit I mentioned earlier on. In this first activity, in order to discover what we know about the different concepts that will be developed later on, we work very much on our own definition of the concepts. You see here the different concepts: climate emergency, global warming, air pollution, emissions, etc. And we asked students to tell us how they would define those concepts. And then in groups, they shared those definitions and came up with team definitions. And then they also talked about where they have heard different things about these concepts in order to know more about them. The idea is to communicate with others in a critical way. They need to know that there isn't or shouldn't be just one single source of information, that you've got plenty of resources to collect information and knowledge about things that are being done elsewhere. Right. This is another activity that's very interesting. I just wanted to share you this. This is an activity based on participation and democracy. It's also based on active listening. The idea being to be able to have different roles in your group. Sometimes you need to talk and sometimes you need to listen to the others. This session lasts again 2 hours, and we invite students to place themselves in the shoes of different associations that could be related to Agenda 2030, for instance, or related to associations like Rebelió o Extinció in Barcelona. We also worked with the Chipko movement in India and gave them information about it. So these are different ways of reacting before one same situation that has very unequal impacts. And the idea here was for students to know about other associations and groups of people that work on the defense of human rights. And we also wanted them to look at 2 or 3 premises and then take them and share them in a summit, so to say, and little by little come up with action plans that are based on very specific demands for them to know what the contradictions will be, and maybe that they shouldn't be defending some of the things that defend. So we support here participation and democracy again. And let me end my presentation by saying that our approach is based on social justice, diversity, and Edualter and Entrepueblos. We believe that it's very important to take steps toward the adoption and implementation of alternatives to climate emergency and the energy emergency that we are now undergoing. We need education. We need additional teaching resources for this. We believe this is the way. There's great potential there. We're working in different networks. The idea is that the more connected we are, the better. And we also need to think how to make the existing spaces stronger, more powerful, how we can reach out to additional schools that could participate in this in these projects and use these resources. How can we overcome the existing limitations in terms of resources? Sometimes this very much depends on motivation and on taking the time to work on all these issues. And that's all from me. Thank you very much.
El vídeo es corto.
Yes, I've got a very short video clip.
Ahora lo perdí. A ver. ¿Se oye? A vosotros.
Robaremos unos minutos.
Okay, we are running slightly late, but we have a few minutes if anyone has any questions. No. This is why I'm here. Don't worry, I've got questions, so don't worry. Natalia, it's a very deep-rooted process, right? And there you can see all the different layers up there on the screen. Now, as ecofeminists, I assume you're going to be working on the deconstruction of gender identity as well. How do you do that? To what extent does our gender still affect the way we consume things, the way we participate, etc.? Well, if we look at the different feminist approaches, and ecofeminism is completely cross-cutting all of these approaches, and it goes through all the development of the different contents. But I think we were quite surprised because there was a lot of practice, not just awareness, but practice by young people. They put things in practice. They do things about it. And I'm not a teacher. I'm an expert in projects, so I don't perhaps spend so much time with young people as teachers do. And it was quite surprising for us to see how it's quite deeply rooted, but there's still a lot of work left to be done. We need to deconstruct this gender identity. We need to link different causes, the reasons why things are happening to us, what the consequences of these things are, and then really think about the rights of women. And yes, it's cross-cutting, it's mainstreamed in everything that we do. Well, as you said, we're talking about young women who wouldn't otherwise be engaged in this process of deconstruction, and then young men as well. Because we recently found out that of every 5 young men, 1 young man thinks that gender-based violence doesn't exist, but it's just, something that's been made up. That's fairly shocking, right? So how do you work on all of this? Well, I'm sure many of you can answer this question better than I can. But in my experience, I would say that many years ago in the different projects of international cooperation in which I was involved, it was very clear that men had a very different way of participating than women. And this, I think, it ties in to this piece of news, this discovery that you've just talked about. And then we talked about justice and rights and climate justice seem to be center stage, putting life at the center, putting care at the center of things. But we have to work on overcoming these shortfalls always, and the difference in levels that exist between the genders still today. Even when we're working on environmental issues, yes, definitely, I agree. Thank you very, very much. Thank you very much, Natalia, and a warm round of applause, please.